what is artificial general intelligence? Before I get started, any idea? Takers? No?
Well, it would be an AI that doesn't work on specific problems, because that's in the name, right?
Yeah. Yep, you got a point. It is an AI that is able to learn any concept without being in a certain domain and be able to figure it out. But and beyond that, it should, in theory, be able to not only learn new concepts, but be able to function on its own, which means there is also a working memory and short-term memory, long-term memory, and all the concepts typical to what a similar brain has. All right, so we're going to go into introduction to AGI, and then we're going to go into building AGI, and we'll have our conclusions on AGI. So, for the introduction, we're going to break it down AGI. We're going to go into the components of the AGI, which is like inner workings of how the brain works. It's going to be into a lot of neurology going into this part. Some of the pros and cons of having AGI, which is where a lot of debate could be. And then we're going to also have some cognitive psychology that goes into AGI, and then high-level cognitive functions. All right, breaking it down. So what is intelligence? It's just being able to have the cognitive abilities to learn something, use it, and apply it. And then keep doing this tenfold. So the definition you have here is general cognitive problem solving skills, mental ability to involved in reasoning, perceiving relationships and analogies, calculating, learning, and all that stuff like that. All right, so here we are. What is AGI? Again, I just mentioned to you what it was, but kind of currently where we are, we're that person with the phone. We're starting at that point and moving towards, I don't know what the fourth one is, robotic or whatever it is, but the fifth one is an AGI system that's able to learn continuously on its own. All right, so what's the difference between ANI and AGI? We kind of described it a bit, but I wanted to make sure I hone it in. ANI, artificial narrow intelligence, is kind of currently what we do now. It is our current spill on deep learning, all of the models that we have built so far, like we talked about earlier, BERT and all the different things we went through, is what ANI is, artificial narrow intelligence, which is focused on a specific domain, and that's it. They still call that dumb AI because it's not able to function on its own. I feed it some information, give me an output, tell me if it's right or wrong. So it's smart enough to have the ability to figure things out that we can figure out. So it's not like it's a rule-based. ANI is able to figure things out similar to the way we do, but it doesn't have any kind of autonomous system to drive it, and there is only one certain domain. But AGI, on the other hand, will have some kind of autonomy, and also it would have the ability to open up to any domain. So, what makes AGI? Like I said, it's autonomous. This is by Ray Kurzweil. It's autonomous. It is goal-directed. Should be able to figure out what goals it wants and go after that. And it should be adaptive, constantly learning, as I mentioned before, changing the way it understands the world and the environment that it's in. And then before I go forward on that, an AGI unit, or agent is the term that we use, be mindful that in any scenario that it's in, it should be able to learn. So the sensory system we have now, you have eyes, you have nose and a mouth like that, but what if you didn't have those? You have a different set of sensory inputs. It should be able to use those sensory inputs and still be able to use those sensors to learn something new. So for example, I don't know, reading might be one sensory system, even though we don't feel that's the way we use our eyes to do that, but if that's all we had, we'll use that. All right, so example of an AGI. So assuming that it's already a self-sustained system that can work on its own, I'm gonna break down what it does. First, I ask it, can you write a software program to do an org chart for me? The AGI will recognize multiple things. Who's making the request? This is one of the things. And why? on its own. It would figure this out on its own because it's constantly thinking, so it's asking this request and why. It was, does this request fit into the AGI agent's belief? That the belief is actually what can it do? Or let me rephrase that. Can they believe it can do it? And is the request moral? Then it would break down the request into recognizable pieces that it's already learned before. Then if the AGI determines it is worth doing, both with time and benefit, it breaks it down the task. Then afterwards, it will utilize functions already learned, because everything we learn is a function. So it use all functions that's already been learned already to figure out what it should use for the top-down approach. And the last thing it would do is it will evaluate all of the pieces of the org chart, and if it couldn't find anything, it will go online, search what it is about it, bring that knowledge in, reassociate it with what is learned, and then keep doing this cycle until it has adjusted itself to learn how to build one. So, for example, if it saw an org chart online, hierarchy of how a company works, it will say, okay, this is what similarly how an org chart works. I would try to build that, but also the knowledge of knowing the people or the system that I'm working with also is embedded as well. So it will integrate the two into one, and typically general adversarial networks are good for this as well. We talked about this earlier. To put multiple things together and generate something new that hasn't been done before. So all these processes described are not coded. You don't code these things. They are learned functions. And that's what AGI is supposed to do. And every function learned is a function learned for, let me rephrase that. Every function learned is used to build new functions. And that's why when a baby is, for example, born, like for instance my son, he had already small levels of knowledge, already embedded based on, I guess, evolution. But as he began to grow, he had learning mechanisms that help him grow certain functions of domains of different areas of knowledge. And those functions learned, those functions were used to learn new functions continuously, building and reorganizing data every single day of his life. So who's working on AGI? OpenAI, for example, who started by Elon Musk. He's the initial person who started this out. Now, Microsoft want to get in the game, and they want to put $1 billion in on this. They went strong. DeepMind also did the same thing. SingularityNet, Neuralink is another thing about Elon Musk. He seems to hate AI, but he's all in it. He's working on the actual physical part of embedding things into your mind. If you guys are familiar with that, it's odd, but that's what he's working on. And of course, like I said, China's working on this, huge as well. And other people are doing this. But the real people who are working on this are people underground or startups. Underground people or startups are the ones who are putting in significant amount of time and energy to build an AGI system. Because whoever first to build this is going to have a lot of support and wealth from it. And we'll talk about that later. Okay. So key people who are AGI now, there's Demis Hassabis, I told you from DeepMind, who are Google has bought their company. There is Ben Goertzel, who's on SingularityNet, who built the OpenCog AGI framework. And then there's also Sam Altman, who's not really into, he doesn't have a background in AGI, he has a background in computer science, but he is now the CEO of OpenAI, and his focus is to push as much as they can. And like I said, Microsoft had put $1 billion into them, so they want to be able to work on together to build an AGI. So a little bit about this guy here. He is struggling with Google because both of them, Google wants to own pretty much all the rights to what they make. Even though they do own them, he wants to separate out from Google, and anything they build on their own is kind of the property of DeepMind. But Google's like, no, that's ours. Whatever you build is ours. So they're struggling with that battle right now. But he has a PhD in artificial intelligence, and he has a thesis in neural processes and all that good stuff like that. Smart guy. SingularityNet, OpenCog, he's been in it for the last 30 years. He's been working on AGI for that long, and he has a lot of pull. But the difference about him is, compared to other people, is he's more into the distribution of AI among everybody, not just one company having it, one entity having it all. He wants to have something that's pretty much a federation of AI among everyone in the world. That's what his focus is on. And of course, this last guy is OpenAI, and Sam Altman is actually he's a pretty smart guy. He used to be the president over at Y Combinator. Now he is focusing on OpenAI, which has a pretty good. They have been leading lately in the AI battle on creating AGI. It's interesting. They started out as a nonprofit. We want to give it to the world, but I think when things started working out, they switched into a for-profit company and started talking about keeping our models to ourselves. They don't want to give it out anymore. Things change when you start making money. Now, of course, again, that's it. There's China as well. They are doing all they can to push AGI systems as well. They have a lot of models. You can find these online. They're not out there as much. You can't see them as much here in the US, but they have all types of researchers over there working on building systems that represent AGI. Why is AGI so important? There's a gold rush on this. As I said, there's a huge amount of money you can get from out of it. Imagine a system that I can say, hey, I need this done, and it will do the whole task for me 100% without me influencing it or telling it what to do. It gets it done within probably 10 to 15 minutes that I can have someone do in a year. That's why they want this. It can also help with money. There's a lot of issues with it. It can eradicate type of cancers because it spends time constantly researching different types of scenarios and testing it out without having a person do it.